A Dream on Whispering Creek. The morning mist still clung to the hollows, a pearlescent veil over the nascent day as Jacob strode out, his boots making soft imprints on the dew-kissed grass. This land, stretching gently beside the murmur of Whispering Creek, was his, a gift from his Großvater, a silent testament to generations of toil and faith. It wasn't a grand estate, merely a broad meadow sloping down to the water's edge, bordered by a stand of venerable oaks on one side and a thicket of wild elderberries on the other. But to Jacob, it was boundless, a canvas awaiting the careful strokes of his life's work. He walked the perimeter slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning every undulation of the terrain, every cluster of wild clover. He felt the subtle give of the soil beneath his sturdy frame, a rich, dark earth that promised bounty. The air carried the sweet, earthy scent of damp loam and the faint, clean tang of the creek.
A red-winged blackbird darted from a cattail, its call a bright, clear note in the quiet symphony of the morning. Here he envisioned the house. Not a sprawling edifice, but a sturdy, simple structure, 2 stories perhaps, with a broad porch facing east to catch the first light. He imagined the rhythmic swing of a porch swing, the laughter of children echoing through the morning air. His mind's eye saw the precise spot for the foundation, where the ground was firm and offered a gentle rise, ensuring good drainage and a clear view of the fields he would cultivate. He could almost feel the weight of the axe in his hands, splitting logs for the framing, the satisfying thud of the hammer driving nails home. He moved further north, towards the cluster of oaks. This would be the site of the barn. A grand structure it would be, built to last 100 years, housing his milking cows, his draft horses, and storing the sweet-smelling hay he would harvest. He pictured the vast open space within, the scent of fresh straw and warm animal breath, the quiet hum of activity at dawn and dusk. He saw himself leading the horses out to the fields, their powerful shoulders straining against the plow, turning the earth in neat, dark furrows. The placement was crucial, close enough to the house for easy access, but far enough to keep the smells distinct, and sheltered by the trees from the harshest winter winds. The creek itself would be an artery of life for the farm. He would need to dig a well, of course, but the creek offered a constant, reliable source of water for the animals and for irrigating the garden. He pictured a neat row of apple trees along its bank, their blossoms a froth of white in spring, their fruit heavy and red in autumn. The garden, he decided, would stretch from the house towards the creek, a vibrant tapestry of corn, beans, squash, and potatoes. He saw himself kneeling in a rich soil, his hands callous from planting, weeding, and harvesting, the sun warm on his back. Jacob spent hours simply walking, not speaking, just absorbing the land, letting it speak to him. He knelt occasionally, crumbling a clod of earth between his fingers, testing its texture, its promise. He picked up a smooth grey stone from the creek bed, turning it over in his palm, feeling its coolness against his skin. This was not just land. It was a future, a legacy, a life waiting to be built with his own hands, his own sweat. As the sun climbed higher, chasing away the last vestiges of mist, Jacob made his way back towards the lane, his mind buzzing with possibilities. He had a rough mental map, a blueprint etched into his very being. The physical work would be immense, a multi-year undertaking, but the vision was so clear, so compelling, that the sheer scale of the task didn't daunt him. It merely sharpened his resolve. Evenings in the small, inherited house where he currently resided were filled with the soft glow of a kerosene lamp. After the evening chores were done, after the supper dishes were washed and put away, Jacob would settle at the plain wooden table, a thick blank notebook open before him. His pencil, sharpened to a fine point, would move with deliberate precision across the page. He wasn't an artist in the conventional sense, but his sketches were remarkably detailed, born of careful observation and an innate understanding of structure. He drew the floor plan of the house, labeling each room: kitchen, living area, bedrooms upstairs. He meticulously calculated dimensions, thinking about lumber lengths, the pitch of the roof, the placement of windows to maximize light and airflow. He sketched elevations, showing the gentle slope of the roof, the sturdy lines of the walls, the welcoming shape of the porch. Next came the barn. He drew the stalls for the cows, the tech room for the harnesses, the vast hayloft accessible by a ladder. He considered the direction the barn doors would face, the location of the feed bins, the most efficient layout for daily chores. He even sketched the design of simple hand tools he would need, specialized saws, chisels, and planes, knowing that many he would have to craft himself from raw materials. The garden layout was also mapped out, rows of vegetables marked, the orientation to the sun considered, the path of the future irrigation channels from the well indicated. He even drew the rough outline of a small workshop, a place where he could mend tools, build furniture, and perhaps even carve small wooden toys for future children. The silence of the room was punctuated only by the scratch of his pencil and the occasional turning of a page. Sometimes he would pause, leaning back in his chair, staring at the lines on the page, his brow furrowed in thought. He would close his eyes, re-envisioning the land, superimposing his drawings onto the quiet meadow beside Whispering Creek. He would feel the weight of the imaginary hammer, the pull of the saw, the satisfaction of seeing a raw piece of timber transformed into a vital part of his dream. There was a quiet joy in this planning, a deep satisfaction in the meticulous work of shaping his future, not with grand declarations, but with the humble precision of a pencil on paper. Each line drawn was a step taken, each measurement calculated, a foundation laid. The lamp flickered, casting long shadows across the room, but in Jacob's mind, the light was clear and steady, illuminating the path ahead, beckoning him towards a life built by faith and the strength of his own two hands. He understood that this silent, patient work, this dreaming with a pencil, was as crucial as any timber he would ever raise. It was the blueprint of his devotion, the quiet promise of a life lived in harmony with the land and with God's will. He drew late into the night, the pages filling with his quiet ambition. When he finally extinguished the lamp, the darkness felt not empty, but full of the promise of tomorrow, full of the silent, enduring strength of a dream taking root. He would rise with the sun, as always, but now, each day would bring him closer to the land on Whispering Creek, closer to the physical manifestation of his unwavering vision. The work would be hard, he knew, harder than anything he had yet undertaken. But the vision was worth every ounce of sweat, every ache in his muscles, every calloused hand. For Jacob, the future was not an abstract concept. It was a tangible thing, waiting to be built, board by board, stone by stone, on the land that sang with the quiet promise of his dream. Clearing the path. The crisp morning air held the scent of damp earth and pine as Jacob gripped the worn handle of his axe. The sun, a pale disk above the eastern hills, cast long shadows through the dense woods. This was it, the first swing, the genesis of his dream. He'd meticulously planned, sketched, and prayed, but now the time for contemplation was over. Action called. He selected a slender sapling, its trunk no wider than his forearm, standing defiantly where his garden would one day flourish. With a deep breath, he brought the axe down. The keen blade bit deep, a satisfying thud echoing through the quiet forest. Again and again he swung, his muscles protesting with each impact, but his spirit buoyed by the progress. Sawdust flew, mingling with the earthy smell, and soon, with a soft crack, the sapling toppled. That first tree was a declaration. Over the next few days, Jacob worked with a relentless rhythm that defied the casual observer.
The axe became an extension of his will,
felling larger trees with powerful, deliberate strokes. He learned the subtle art of notching and wedging, directing the fall of each timber to avoid damaging surrounding growth or, worse, himself. The saw, a two-man crosscut he'd inherited from his father, lay folded beside a stack of logs, waiting for the larger trunks that demanded its teeth. For now, the axe was his primary weapon against the encroaching wild. His hands, initially soft from years of farm chores that rarely involved such sustained, heavy impact, quickly toughened. Blisters formed, then burst, giving way to calluses that grew thicker with each passing day. The ache in his shoulders became a constant companion, a dull throb that faded only slightly with the setting sun. Yet, with every tree that fell, every thicket cleared, a patch of light opened up, revealing the rich, dark soil beneath. The true battle began after the trees were down. Roots, ancient and gnarled, laced through the earth, anchoring the ground with tenacious resolve. Jacob learned to wield a grub hoe with surprising dexterity, its heavy blade slicing through smaller roots, its pointed end prying at the larger ones. He used a crowbar, a heavy length of iron, to lever out stubborn stumps, grunting with effort, sweat stinging his eyes. Some roots were as thick as his leg, requiring hours of digging and chopping before they finally surrendered, tearing free from the earth with a sound like a sigh. He worked from dawn till dusk, pausing only for the simple meals his mother packed for him: thick slices of bread, cheese, and sometimes a hard-boiled egg. The sun tracked its slow arc across the sky, marking the passage of time not by hours, but by felled trees and unearthed roots. The forest, once a solid wall of green, began to recede, revealing glimpses of the wide-open sky. The days blurred into a continuum of physical exertion. His clothes, once clean and crisp, became stained with earth and sap, his boots caped with mud. He moved with a newfound fluidity, his body adapting to the demands placed upon it. He learned the subtle language of the wood, the resistance of a particular root, the groan of a tree about to fall. His mind, once filled with abstract blueprints, now focused intensely on the immediate task: the swing of the axe, the pull of the root, the precise placement of the grub hoe. One afternoon, as the sun began its descent, painting the western sky in hues of orange and purple, Jacob stepped back from his work. Before him lay a significant patch of cleared land, perhaps an acre, perhaps more. The ground was scarred with the marks of his labor, but it was open. The oppressive canopy was gone, replaced by an expanse of clear sky. The air, once heavy and still beneath the trees, now moved freely, a soft breeze rustling through the remaining woods at the perimeter. He ran a hand over his sweat-dampened brow, his chest heaving with exertion, but a profound sense of satisfaction bloomed within him. It was not the perfectly manicured field of his dreams, but it was a start, a tangible beginning. The earth, once a chaotic tangle of roots and shade, now lay exposed, waiting for his hand, waiting for the seeds he would one day plant. The silence, broken only by the distant call of a bird, felt different now. Not the quiet of untouched wilderness, but the quiet of potential, of a space made ready. He had cleared the path, not just for his future home, but for the path of his own making. The art of wood. The cleared land, now a wide, sun-drenched expanse, pulsed with the quiet energy of a newly awakened space. Jacob stood amidst it, a deep breath filling his lungs, smelling the raw earth and the lingering sweetness of sawn pine. He'd wrestled with trees and roots, transforming a wild tangle into a clean slate. Now the next challenge awaited, turning those felled giants into usable lumber. He approached the first massive log, a thick oak trunk that dwarfed his axe. This wasn't about felling, it was about precision, about coaxing the wood to yield. He retrieved his splitting maul from where it leaned against a stump, a heavy, wedge-headed tool with a long, sturdy handle. It felt different from the axe, heavier, designed for blunt force rather than a sharp cut. Jacob remembered his father's lessons, long ago, in the communal woodlot. "It ain't about strength, son," his father had grunted, his own maul rising and falling with rhythmic grace. "It's about the grain. Find the weakness, and the wood will tell you." He eyed the oak, tracing the faint lines of its growth rings, searching for a natural seam. The log lay on a sturdy block, raised just enough to give him leverage. He lifted the maul, feeling its weight settle in his hands. It was an awkward, heavy swing at first, more a struggle against gravity than a controlled motion. The maul thudded against the log's surface, bouncing back with a jarring vibration that rattled his arms. No crack, just a dull impact. Frustration pricked at him. He was a man accustomed to physical labor, but this felt different. It demanded a dance with the tool, a partnership. He paused, rubbed his aching shoulders, and took another slow breath. He closed his eyes, picturing his father's form, the smooth arc of the swing, the way the maul seemed to accelerate effortlessly. He opened his eyes, reset his stance, feet planted wide, knees slightly bent. This time, he focused on the flow of the swing, letting the maul's weight do the work. He lifted it higher, almost directly over his head, then brought it down, his gaze fixed on the exact spot he intended to strike. Thwack! This time, the sound was different, deeper, more resonant. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the log. He saw a tiny, hairline crack appear along the grain. Hope surged through him. He lifted the maul again, aiming for the same spot, widening the initial breach. Crack! The sound was exhilarating, sharp and resonant, like a thunderclap echoing through the quiet woods. The log shuddered, and a deep fissure rent its heart, splitting cleanly into two rough halves. Jacob lowered the maul, a wide grin spreading across his face. The scent of fresh oak, sharp and resinous, filled the air. He moved on to the next section, splitting the larger halves into manageable planks. Each swing became more confident, more practiced. He learned to listen to the wood, to anticipate its resistance, to adjust his aim. Sometimes, a stubborn knot would defy his efforts, forcing him to reposition the log, to find a new angle of attack. He learned patience, a lesson the forest had already begun to teach him. Hours melted into days. The sun arced across the sky, baking his skin, the sweat stinging his eyes. His muscles screamed with protest, but a new kind of strength was taking root within him, not just in his arms and back, but in his resolve. He wasn't just swinging a maul. He was shaping his future, one plank at a time. He remembered the early days of clearing, the sheer enormity of the task. Now, as the pile of split lumber grew, a tangible monument to his effort, he felt a profound satisfaction. The rough-hewn planks, stacked neatly, crisscrossed to allow air circulation, formed nascent walls, future floors, the very bones of the structures he envisioned. The rhythmic thwack, crack of the maul became the soundtrack to his days. He worked until the last sliver of daylight faded, until his hands were calloused and his body weary, but his spirit was surprisingly invigorated. He ran his hand over the rough surface of a freshly split plank, feeling the textured grain, the uneven edges. It wasn't milled lumber, perfect and smooth, but it was honest, born of his own effort, imbued with the sweat and determination of his journey. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Jacob stood back, surveying his work. Rows of split lumber, stacked high, stood like silent sentinels. The sheer volume was impressive, a testament to his burgeoning skill and relentless labor. This was more than just wood. It was the promise of a home, a barn, a life built by his own hands, from the ground up. He felt a quiet pride, a deep-seated connection to the land and the materials he was coaxing into being. The art of wood,
he realized, was as much about listening as it was about striking. Stones from the creek. The creek, a shimmering vein tracing the valley floor, held more than just flowing water. It cradled the very foundation of Jacob's future home. After the relentless thud of the maul, the quiet search for stones offered a different kind of respite. Sunlight, a gentle warmth on his back, dappled through the spreading sycamores, sketching transient patterns on the stream bed. He stepped into the cool current, water swirling around his calves, its soft murmur a counterpoint to the distant thrum of summer insects. Each stone presented a choice, not too small to disappear in mortar, nor so massive it would break him. He bent, muscles already protesting from days of felling and spitting, and plunged his hands into the silty bottom. His fingers, roughened by wood, now sought the smooth, cool embrace of river stones. Some were slick with algae, others rough with embedded quartz. He'd assess their heft, their silhouette, picturing them interlocked, forming an unyielding barrier against the earth. The first few dozen found their way into the burlap sack, improvised from old feed bags slung over his shoulder. The load steadily grew, a familiar ache blossoming across his shoulders and down his spine. The creek bed was a mosaic of hues, grey, ochre, rust red, with an occasional flash of white. He moved deliberately, his gaze sifting through the glinting surfaces beneath the water, his breath a steady rhythm. The sun climbed, its warmth growing more insistent. He emptied the first sack onto the designated foundation site, a burgeoning pile of irregular shapes promising stability. Then he returned to the creek, his boots squelching in the mud at the bank. The task was slow, painstaking. One stone at a time. Bend, hoist, trudge, repeat. The sheer volume of material seemed immense, a mountain of rock to be shifted by hand. His back began to truly throb, a deep resonance with every step. Sweat trickled down his temples, stinging his eyes. Hours blurred together. The sycamore's shade lengthened, stretching across the water. His hands, perpetually wet and gritty, felt raw. He recalled his father's counsel about discerning the weakness in wood and wondered if stone held a similar secret, a hidden current that would ease this toil. But no, stone was different. Stone demanded brute force, unwavering persistence, and a steadfast will. As he hauled another sack, shoulders stiff, a figure emerged from the dappled light of the woods. Elder Samuel, his stride unhurried, his broad-brimmed hat casting a shadow over his kind face. He carried a hickory walking stick, its surface burnished smooth by years of handling. "A good day for gathering, Jacob," Elder Samuel observed, his voice a gentle rumble. He stopped at the creek's edge, his gaze sweeping over the growing pile of stones. The creek yields generously when approached with patience. Jacob straightened, rubbing a hand across his lower back. "It asks for much in return, Elder Samuel." He managed a weary smile. "My back remembers every single one." Elder Samuel's eyes twinkled. "A solid foundation demands solid effort. And a good foundation, Jacob, is worth every ache." He paused, looking at Jacob with a thoughtful expression. "My father used to say that a house built stone, by your own hand, holds not just the earth, but a piece of your spirit within its walls. It recognizes your effort, Jacob. It will stand strong because of it." The words, plain as they were, settled over Jacob like a soothing balm. He looked at the haphazard pile of rocks, seeing not just the weight, but the profound promise. Each stone was a commitment, a silent prayer for permanence. Elder Samuel's presence, calm and steady, offered quiet encouragement. He wasn't offering to help carry stones, But he was offering something equally valuable: recognition and a shared understanding of enduring labor. "Thank you, Elder Samuel," Jacob said, his voice husky. The elder nodded slowly. "Keep at it, Jacob. One stone at a time. That's how all things of true worth are built." He turned, his gaze lingering on the creek for a moment longer before resuming his unhurried walk back into the woods, leaving Jacob to his rhythmic task. Jacob watched him go, then turned back to the creek. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the western sky in hues of orange and purple. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of damp earth and growing things. He plunged his hands into the water again, the coolness a shock against his warm skin. One stone at a time. The words echoed in his mind, a mantra against the deepening fatigue. He found another, its surface smooth, heavy, and perfect. He placed it in the sack, the weight a familiar burden, but now, somehow, a little lighter. The foundation would be strong. He would ensure it. A sturdy base. The sun, already a searing promise in the eastern sky, found Jacob hunched over a canvas tarp, a mound of fine creek sand shimmering gold before him. He'd spent the previous day hauling bag after bag from a dry bed a mile upstream, his shoulders screaming with each trip, but the satisfaction of the growing pile was a balm. Now, he added measured scoops of powdered lime, its fine dust kicking up a chalky cloud that stung his nostrils. Water, drawn from the well he dug months ago, was poured in slowly, deliberately, as he began to mix. His shovel became an extension of his arms, turning and folding the gritty mixture. The sand resisted at first, clinging stubbornly, but with each powerful thrust and turn, it began to yield, absorbing the water and the lime. The sound was a rhythmic scrape and slosh, a wet, heavy sigh. Sweat trickled down his temples, stinging his eyes, but he kept his focus on the evolving texture beneath his blade. It needed to be just right, not too thin, not too thick. A creamy, workable consistency that would bind the stones into an unbreakable whole. His grandfather, a stonemason of considerable local repute, had taught him that the mortar was the glue, the silent partner in the strength of any wall. Jacob felt the ghost of his grandfather's hand on his, guiding the shovel, whispering patience. When the mortar finally achieved the desired pliability, a smooth, earthy paste, Jacob wiped his brow with the back of a hand, leaving a smear of grey. He'd cleared the ground where his house would stand weeks ago, leveling the earth with painstaking care, and now the first course of stones lay waiting. These were the largest, flattest pieces he'd found, heavy and substantial, chosen for their unwavering stability. He moved to the corner, the envisioned footprint of his home rising in his mind's eye. With a deep breath, he troweled a generous bed of mortar onto the prepared earth. The damp coolness seeped through his gloves. He lifted the first stone, a rough-hewn slab the color of dark earth, and settled it firmly onto the mortar, wiggling it slightly to ensure a solid seat. He tapped it with the handle of his trowel, listening for the reassuring thud that spoke of true contact. The mortar squeezed out from beneath, a tangible sign of the stone's embrace. He scraped the excess, careful not to waste a speck. One stone became two, then three, each laid with meticulous attention. The sun climbed higher, relentless, baking the exposed earth and warming the stones. His back ached with a familiar protest, and his forearms burned with the effort of lifting and positioning. He paused often, stepping back to eye his progress, to ensure the line was straight, the levels true. A plumb bob, fashioned from a fishing weight and a length of twine, became his constant companion, hanging unwavering against the budding wall.
The silence of the fields was broken only by the rhythmic shwick of his trowel against stone, the occasional grunt of effort, and the distant buzz of insects. Each stone was a puzzle piece, some fitting snugly, others requiring smaller chinking stones to fill the gaps, wedged in with precision and more mortar. Jacob saw the structure not as a series of individual rocks, but as a unified mass, each element contributing to the strength of the whole. He recalled Samuel's words about a foundation being imbued with the builder's spirit. As he worked, he felt a part of himself flowing into the mortar, solidifying with the stone. By midday, the first course of the foundation was complete, a sturdy, dark ring against the lighter earth. It stood perhaps a foot high, a humble beginning, but to Jacob, it was monumental.
He ate his simple lunch, hard cheese, rye bread, and an apple, sitting on one of the newly laid stones, feeling its solidity beneath him. He traced the line of mortar with a finger, admiring the stark contrast between the rough stone and the smooth, even joint. The afternoon brought more of the same, a patient, unwavering effort. He started the second course, carefully overlapping the joints of the first, ensuring that no two vertical seams aligned, a crucial detail for structural integrity. The wall began to gain height, a tangible demarcation of space. It was no longer just an idea, a sketch on a scrap of paper, but a physical presence. The vision in his mind was slowly, painstakingly, taking form in the raw materials of the land. His hands, though calloused and stiff, worked with a growing confidence. Each stone laid was a silent vow, a commitment to the home that would rise from this sturdy base. As the shadows lengthened, casting long fingers across the field, the foundation stood nearly 3 feet high, a testament to Jacob's unwavering purpose. Raising the walls. The crisp morning air, redolent with pine and damp earth, usually signified progress to Jacob. Today, however, that familiar perfume mingled with the inviting scent of fresh bread and robust coffee, wafting from the makeshift outdoor kitchen where Sarah and other women were already busy. Even before the sun had fully crested the eastern ridge, wagons, each laden with families and tools, began their slow rumble down the lane. Jacob observed their arrival, a quiet knot of anticipation tightening in his chest. This was the day. His meticulously prepared foundation, a low stone wall, anchored the future dwelling to the earth, a testament to weeks of diligent labor. Now, the walls themselves awaited. He walked among the timbers, each one hand-hewn, mortised, and tenoned, a silent chorus of craftsmanship poised for elevation. His brothers, Levi and Daniel, were already scrutinizing the corner posts, their practiced eyes searching for any last-minute flaws. "Looks good, Jacob," Levi grunted, patting a stout oak beam with approval. "Solid work." Jacob offered a small, grateful nod. "It's ready." Soon, the clearing hummed with activity. Men, both young and seasoned, clustered around the largest timbers, their voices a low blend of instructions and good-natured banter. Elder Samuel, his silver beard gleaming in the morning light, surveyed the scene with a knowing twinkle. He approached Jacob, a gnarled hand settling on his shoulder. "A fine day for building, son," Samuel observed, his voice soft yet resonant. "The Lord smiles upon honest effort and a helping hand." "He does, Elder," Jacob replied, enveloped by the warmth of community.
This structure was more than just his house. It was their house, forged by collective strength and goodwill.
The first wall section, a lengthy stretch of posts and girts, lay prone on the ground. Ropes snaked around strategic points, dozens of hands gripping them, poised. "All right, brothers." Daniel's voice cut through the murmuring crowd. "On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Muscles bunched, backs bowed, and with a shared exhalation of effort, the massive frame began its ascent. Jacob, positioned at a critical corner, felt the timber's immense weight transfer through the rope to his arms and shoulders. He braced his feet, his gaze locked on the rising wood, guiding it, urging it skyward. Inch by agonizing inch, the wall ascended, swaying gently, threatening to falter. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers as it wavered. "Hold steady!" Elder Samuel's voice boomed, slicing through the sudden tension. "Steady, men! You've got it!" And they did.
With a final surge of power, the wall's base settled perfectly into the mortises carved into the foundation's sill plate. Cheers erupted, followed by the rhythmic thud of mallets driving in wooden pegs, securing the first section upright. The sun, now higher, cast long shadows of the newly erected frame across the cleared earth. The process unfolded again and again, wall after wall. The air thrummed with the creak of straining wood, the grunt of exertion, and the rhythmic crack of hammers. Children, safely corralled by their mothers, watched wide-eyed, captivated by the transformation unfolding before them. Each precisely cut and fitted timber found its appointed place, a testament to Jacob's meticulous planning and the unified effort. As the day waned, the structure gained height and definition. The main beams for the second floor were hoisted into position, then the joists, each one a miniature triumph.
Jacob worked relentlessly, shifting from one task to another, aiding in lifts, pegging connections, bracing supports. His hands were raw, his muscles ached with a profound, satisfying weariness, yet his spirit soared. He envisioned not just wood, but the contours of rooms, the promise of refuge, the very framework of a life to be lived within these burgeoning walls. By late afternoon, the skeletal frame of the house stood proud and stark against the brilliant blue sky. The rafters, too, were settled, forming the steep pitch of the roof, like arms reaching towards the heavens. The last few pegs were driven home with triumphant blows, echoing across the quieting land. Jacob stepped back, his chest heaving slightly, and simply gazed. The timber frame, stark and magnificent, transcended mere wood. It was a tangible manifestation of his dream, brought to life by the hands of his community. The scent of fresh-cut oak and honest sweat perfumed the cooling air. The sun dipped lower, bathing the structure in a golden light that seemed to bestow its blessing. Elder Samuel approached once more, his face alight with quiet pride. "A good day's work, Jacob," he said, his gaze sweeping over the standing frame. "A very good day. You've built more than a house today, my son. You've built a foundation of fellowship." Jacob looked at the elder, then back at the towering frame. He could almost hear the laughter of children, the soft cadence of an evening prayer, the comforting crackle of a warm hearth. It was still just a frame, open to the elements, but it felt utterly complete. The house had truly begun. Pegs and beans. The crisp morning air carried the scent of pine and damp earth as Jacob surveyed the skeletal form of his house. Sunbeams, still weak in the early hour, speared through the open framework, highlighting dust motes dancing in the void where walls would soon stand.
Today was about solidity, about the quiet strength of wood against wood,
Held fast by nothing more than careful cuts and hand-turned pegs. He remembered the lessons from his father, years ago, watching him fashion a sturdy workbench. "No nails, Jacob," his father had said, his voice a low rumble. "Nails are for speed, for things that might one day need to be taken apart. Pegs are for permanence, for promises." Jacob had internalized that wisdom, a core tenet of their way of life, where craftsmanship wasn't just a skill, but a moral imperative. His workbench, now covered in wood shavings, held a selection of seasoned oak and hickory logs, split and roughly shaped. He picked up a block of oak, its grain a tight, intricate pattern. With a draw knife, he began to shave away the excess, his movements deliberate, rhythmic.
The blade sang a low metallic hum against the wood, peeling off long curling strips.
Each peg needed to be slightly tapered, a hair thicker at one end than the other, designed to swell and tighten within its mortise hole, creating an unyielding bond. His hands, calloused and strong, felt the subtle resistance of the wood, guiding the draw knife with an intuitive understanding. He rotated the peg, examining its nascent form, then switched to a spoke shave for finer adjustments. The shavings now whispered instead of sang, falling in delicate, almost transparent curls. He tested the peg against a pre-drilled hole in a scrap piece of timber, feeling for the perfect snugness. Too loose, and the joint would weep. Too tight, and it might split the beam. There was a sweet spot, a balance point, that only experience and a keen eye could discern. He worked through a pile of wood, each peg a small sculpture, a testament to patience and precision. By midday, a basket overflowed with smooth, perfectly tapered wooden pegs, each one a silent promise of strength.
The actual joining began in the afternoon. Levi and Daniel joined him, their faces serious as they helped hoist the prepared beams. The air thrummed with focused energy. Jacob checked each mortise and tenon joint, running his fingers along the edges, ensuring a flawless fit. He tapped the tenon gently into its mortise with a wooden mallet, the sound a dull thud that resonated through the timbers. Once seated, he aligned the pre-drilled peg holes. Then came the moment of truth. He selected a peg, a piece of oak he had shaped earlier, and positioned it over the first hole. With the mallet, he struck it with controlled force. The peg slid in, slowly at first, then with increasing resistance, until it was firmly embedded, its tapered end pulling the joint tight. The sound was a satisfying thwack, a definitive closure. He repeated the process, peg after peg, the rhythmic strikes echoing in the emerging frame.
Each successful peg solidified not just a joint, but a feeling of accomplishment that settled deep in his bones. As the sun began its westward descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the final, crucial stage commenced, setting the roof beams. These were the longest and heaviest, spanning the width of the house, designed to bear the weight of the roof and all the weather it would face. With Levi and Daniel carefully positioned on scaffolding, guiding ropes, and using a system of pulleys they'd rigged, Jacob directed the hoisting. The first massive beam creaked as it lifted, a groan of ancient wood yielding to new purpose. It swung precariously for a moment, then settled with a soft thump into its waiting notches. Jacob climbed up, his steps agile despite the height, and began the delicate process of securing it. He used a long, thin auger to finish drilling the peg holes, the shavings spiraling out, catching the last golden light.
He then drove in the pegs, securing the beam with powerful, practiced blows. One by one, the roof beams found their place, forming a robust, symmetrical pattern against the fading sky. When the last peg was driven home and the final beam sat squarely, the collective sigh seemed to ripple through the quiet clearing. The skeletal structure of Jacob's house was complete. It stood tall and proud, a testament to his vision, his labor, and the enduring strength of wood and communal spirit. Looking up, he could almost feel the weight of the future roof, the shelter it would provide, and the life that would unfold beneath it. The framework, once a collection of individual timbers, had become a unified whole, ready for its skin, ready for its soul. Under the open sky. With the skeletal structure complete, Jacob knew the next critical phase was the roof, the shield against the elements, the capstone of his burgeoning dream.
He gathered bundles of cedar, the scent sharp and resinous, and began the meticulous work of shingle making. Each log was split with a froe, the blade singing through the grain, separating planks of varying thickness. Then, with a draw knife pulled toward him across a shaving horse, he began to shape them, paring away excess wood, smoothing edges,
and creating the subtle taper that would allow each shingle to overlap its neighbor perfectly. His hands, calloused and strong, moved with a practiced rhythm, the shavings piling around his boots like golden curls. Days blurred into a focused meditation of wood and steel, the steady thwack-thwack of the froe and the whisper of the draw knife the only sounds breaking the morning quiet. He worked from dawn till dusk, his back aching, his muscles protesting, but a deep satisfaction bloomed within him with each precisely crafted piece.
He often thought of Cobb during these long hours, imagining his grandfather engaged in similar solitary tasks, the same dedication imprinted on his own hands. The sun, a silent witness, tracked across the sky, painting the workshop floor with shifting patterns of light and shadow. As the pile of finished shingles grew, so too did Jacob's anticipation. He was not just shaping wood, he was shaping the future, piece by painstaking piece. Finally, the day came when the last shingle was carved, and Jacob began the ascent. The ladder felt solid beneath his boots, a familiar path to a new perspective. High above the ground, the world unfurled around him. The newly tilled fields stretched out like a patchwork quilt, the distant woods a dark green fringe against the horizon. The air up here was different, sharper, cleaner, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. He spent the next weeks under the open sky, a solitary figure against the vast expanse.
Nail by nail, shingle by shingle, the roof began to take shape. He started at the eaves, carefully aligning the first course, ensuring each piece lay flat and true. The hammer became an extension of his arm, its rhythmic tap, 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 echoing across the silent homestead. He worked his way upwards, row after interlocking row, the cedar shingles creating a beautiful textured surface that gleamed gold in the sunlight. His movements were precise, economical, honed by years of working with his hands. He felt the subtle give of the timbers beneath him, the sturdy framework holding firm, a testament to the collective effort that had raised it. The sun beat down on his back, warming him to the bone, and the wind, sometimes gentle, sometimes boisterous, ruffled his hair and tugged at his shirt. He savored these sensations, feeling deeply connected to the natural world around him. He watched hawks circle lazily overhead, their keen eyes surveying the same landscape he now overlooked.
He observed the slow, deliberate march of the seasons, the last tenacious leaves clinging to the oak trees, giving way to the stark beauty of bare branches. Then, the first tentative blush of spring green appearing in the distant forests. From his perch, he could see the dirt path winding back towards the main road, a thread connecting his isolated world to the broader community. He imagined the wagons that would travel it, laden with supplies, bringing visitors, carrying his own produce to market. This house, still open to the elements from within, was already becoming a beacon, a landmark in the making. He was not merely nailing shingles. He was weaving a tapestry of protection and permanence, a shield for the life that would unfold beneath it. Sometimes he would pause, hammer resting on a shingle, and simply look. He would trace the lines of the fields with his eyes, envisioning the future crops, the garden he would plant, the barn that would eventually stand beside the house. He saw children playing in the yard, heard the lowing of cattle, felt the comforting hum of a fully functioning farm. This vision, so clear from his elevated vantage point, fueled his resolve. Each nail driven, each shingle secured, was a step closer to making that vision a tangible reality. The work was hard, relentless even, but it was imbued with a purpose that transcended mere labor. It was an act of creation,
a testament to enduring faith and unwavering commitment. He was building more than a house. He was building a legacy, one shingle at a time, under the vast, watchful eye of the open sky. Furnishing a home. With the roof sealed against the elements, a profound sense of accomplishment settled over Jacob. The house, once a skeletal frame, now offered true shelter. The air inside, though still carrying the scent of fresh-cut lumber, held a distinct warmth, a silent promise of hearth and home. His hands, calloused and strong from months of building, now turned to the task of furnishing this nascent dwelling. He started with the most fundamental pieces. A sturdy table, he decided, would be the heart of the main room. Selecting thick, straight planks of oak he'd carefully milled weeks ago, Jacob laid them out on sawhorses. The rhythmic scrape of his hand plane against the wood filled the quiet space, shaving off thin curls that piled like golden ribbons on the earthen floor. He joined the planks with precision, using mortise and tenon joints, each one fitted with a meticulous eye and the gentle persuasion of a wooden mallet. The legs, thick and unwavering, were pegged into place, ensuring a table that would withstand generations of meals and countless hours of work. Next came the chairs. He envisioned simple, robust designs, built for comfort during long evenings by the fire. He shaped the seat planks with a draw knife, giving them a subtle curve, and then turned to the backrests, carefully steam-bending thin strips of ash until they held the desired arc. The process was slow, demanding patience and a keen understanding of the wood's resilience. As each chair took shape, Jacob tested its balance, its stability, feeling the weight in his hands, ensuring it was just right. He imagined Sarah, her gentle presence, sitting across from him, sharing stories of the day, the scent of supper wafting from the hearth. The bed was a simpler affair, but no less significant. A robust frame of pine, strong and wide, was assembled in the corner of the small sleeping chamber. He crafted a slatted base, knowing that a proper straw mattress, once woven, would rest atop it, providing a soft embrace after long days. As he worked, the house began to feel less like a construction site and more like a home. The echoing emptiness slowly receded, replaced by the quiet presence of his handiwork. But a home was more than just indoor comforts. The land still beckoned, demanding cultivation and care. Jacob knew he needed reliable tools, implements crafted with the same care and foresight he'd given his house. He turned his attention to a wooden wheelbarrow, a tool essential for moving earth, stones, and eventually, harvests. He selected a sturdy ash log, splitting it with wedges and then shaping the planks for the bed of the barrow. The wheel itself was a marvel of simple engineering, a thick hub of oak, spokes radiating outward, and a rim carefully bent from a single piece of hickory, all held together by pegs and the strength of the wood itself. He carved the handles, smoothing them until they fit perfectly in his grasp, anticipating the familiar ache in his arms after a day of hauling. For the garden, he needed a hoe and a rake. He found a stout branch of applewood for the hoe handle, its natural curve fitting his hand ergonomically. For the blade, he hammered a piece of salvaged iron, shaping and sharpening it against a grinding stone until it held a keen edge. The rake, too, was a testament to his resourcefulness. A long, straight pole of ash formed the handle, into which he meticulously drilled a series of holes. Into these, he pegged strong, resilient teeth carved from locust wood, knowing their hardness would withstand the rigors of tilling soil and gathering debris. Each tool, born from raw materials and the sweat of his brow, was an extension of his own will, a partner in his endeavor to transform the wilderness. Finally, the moment came to place the first pieces of furniture. He carried the heavy oak table through the doorway, its bulk surprisingly graceful in his arms, and centered it in the main room. The chairs followed, carefully arranged around it, their simple forms inviting. He paused, looking around. The rough-hewn walls, the packed earth floor, the nascent furniture, it was all here. It was real. A faint smile touched his lips as he envisioned the aroma of freshly baked bread, the murmur of conversation, the laughter of children filling these rooms. He moved into the sleeping chamber, carefully positioning the bed frame. It filled the space with a quiet dignity, a promise of rest and renewal. He stood at the threshold, surveying his work. Each piece, from the smallest peg to the broadest plank, resonated with the effort and intention he had poured into it. This was not merely furniture. It was the tangible expression of a dream taking root. It was the beginning of a home, built not just with wood and stone, but with purpose, resilience, and an unwavering vision for the future. The house, no longer just a structure, now possessed the nascent soul of a dwelling, waiting for life to fill its quiet corners.
The barn project. The completion of the house, though a monumental feat, felt like a prelude. Jacob now stood before a new challenge, one that dwarfed the dwelling in sheer scale and material demand: the barn. It was to be the beating heart of his farm, a sanctuary for livestock, a storehouse for harvests, and a workshop for the endless tasks of rural life. He walked the perimeter of the designated site, a broad, level expanse south of the house, visualizing the massive timber frame rising against the sky. The air, crisp and hinting at the approach of autumn, carried the scent of pine and damp earth. This structure wouldn't just be built, it would be sculpted from the very sinews of the land. His initial calculations for the house had been meticulous, but the barn demanded an entirely different order of magnitude. He needed longer timbers, thicker beams, and an unprecedented volume of planking. The forest, his tireless provider, would be called upon once more, but this time the felling and hauling would require a concerted effort from the entire community. He spent several evenings poring over his grandfather Cobb's faded sketches, tracing the intricate joinery, imagining the weight of the haylofts, the robust stalls, and the wide, welcoming doors. Cobb's notes, terse and practical, spoke of resilience and the strength of shared labor. The following Sunday, after the service, Jacob approached Elder Samuel. The old man, his beard a snowy cascade against his dark vest, listened patiently, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "A barn, Jacob," he mused, a slow smile spreading across his face. "A fitting next step. The Lord provides, and he provides through his people." Word spread quickly through the community. Building a barn was more than just a task. It was a communal rite of passage, a testament to shared industry. Jacob organized the lumber harvest with military precision. Teams of men, axes glinting in the dappled sunlight, descended upon the designated stand of towering oaks and sturdy maples. The rhythmic thud of steel against wood echoed through the valley, a primal symphony of creation. Horses, their powerful flanks straining, dragged the felled giants to the portable sawmill Jacob had borrowed from a neighboring farm. The air grew thick with sawdust, a fine golden mist that clung to hair and clothing, carrying the sweet aroma of freshly cut timber. Women, too, played their vital part, preparing mountains of food, hearty stews, crusty breads, and pies brimming with seasonal fruits to sustain the tireless workers. Children darted through the undergrowth, their laughter a counterpoint to the serious work unfolding around them. It was a bustling tableau of collective purpose, each person contributing their unique skill and energy to the nascent structure. As the lumber began to pile up, neatly stacked and curing, Jacob turned his attention to the foundation. This barn, unlike the house, would require a stone perimeter to guard against the relentless gnawing of time and moisture. Days were spent hauling massive field stones from the nearby creek bed,
shaping them with hammer and chisel and fitting them together with a dry stack precision that spoke of centuries of inherited wisdom. His hands, already calloused from the house, grew tougher still, his muscles singing with the strain of lifting and positioning the heavy rocks. Then came the framing, the grand ballet of timber raising. This was the moment of truth, the culmination of weeks of planning and tireless labor. On a clear, bright Saturday, the entire community gathered. Men with strong backs and steady hands positioned the massive sill beams, carefully plumbed and leveled.
Jacob, with the help of several experienced carpenters, laid out the complex joinery, meticulously notching and mortising each beam. The air crackled with anticipation. The first vertical post, a formidable oak trunk, was slowly levered into place. Jacob shouted instructions, his voice hoarse but clear, guiding the team. With a collective heave, the tenon slid into its mortise with a satisfying thud. Pegs, thick and stout, were hammered home, locking the joint with an unbreakable embrace. One by one, the posts rose, followed by the horizontal girts and plates, forming the skeletal outline of the immense structure. Elder Samuel, watching from a slight rise, nodded slowly, a profound sense of satisfaction radiating from him. "See, Jacob," he called out, his voice carrying over the din of hammers and shouts. "The Lord blesses those who work with open hearts and helping hands."
This barn will stand as a testament not just to your labor, but to the spirit of our community. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the initial framework of the barn stood proud and tall. It was an imposing sight, its timber bones reaching towards the heavens, a monument to human ingenuity and shared resolve. Jacob wiped sweat from his brow, his gaze sweeping over the rising structure. It was far from finished, but the most daunting hurdle had been cleared. The barn, a symbol of abundance and enduring strength, was taking shape, one joint, one beam, one shared effort at a time. Storm's fury. The oppressive humidity of the late afternoon hung heavy, a thick, invisible blanket that stifled movement and promised a reckoning. Jacob, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of a calloused hand, eyed the darkening horizon. A low rumble, distinct from the rhythmic thud of hammers, vibrated through the air.
The sky, a bruised purple and grey, began to churn with an ominous intensity. "Looks like a squall brewing," one of the younger men, Caleb, called out, his voice tinged with unease. Jacob nodded, his gaze fixed on the western sky, where jagged streaks of lightning now intermittently illuminated the churning clouds. The massive skeleton of the barn, its timber frame proudly reaching for the heavens, stood vulnerable. Only a few sections of roofing had been laid, mere patches against the vast expanse that was still open to the elements. "We need to secure everything," Jacob commanded, his voice firm, cutting through the rising wind. "Loose timbers, tools, anything that can fly." The communal energy, previously focused on the careful placement of rafters, now shifted to a frantic scramble. Men moved with newfound urgency, their faces grim. The first drops of rain hit like pebbles, fat and cold, splattering against the dry earth. Within minutes, the drizzle escalated into a deluge. The wind, a capricious beast, howled through the open framework of the barn, moaning and whistling, threatening to tear the carefully joined timbers apart. A particularly violent gust ripped through the structure, causing a collective gasp from the men. A section of newly laid purlins, still awaiting the full weight of the roof, shuddered precariously. "To the west wall!" Jacob bellowed, pointing. "We need bracing, fast!" He grabbed a long spar of hickory, its surface slick with rain, and sprinted towards the swaying timbers. Others followed, their movements hindered by the blinding rain and the growing chaos of the wind. The air was thick with flying debris, leaves, twigs, even small branches torn from nearby trees. Elder Samuel, his face a mask of concern, joined the men,
his usual calm replaced by a determined grimness. "Hold fast, lads," he encouraged, his voice barely audible above the storm's roar.
He began to help Jacob lash the hickory spar to a vertical post, his gnarled hands working with surprising speed despite his age. The timbers groaned under the assault, their massive forms swaying like reeds in a current. Jacob could feel the vibrations through the wood, a living entity fighting for its existence. He strained against the wind, his muscles screaming in protest as he pushed a diagonal brace into position. Water streamed down his face, blinding him, but he refused to yield. The thought of all the shared labor, the weeks of planning, the community's collective hope embodied in this structure fueled his resolve. This barn would not fall. A thunderclap, deafening and immediate, shook the very ground beneath their feet. The sky momentarily lit up in an eerie phosphorescent glow, revealing the frantic dance of men against the backdrop of the storm-lashed wilderness.
The barn structure, a silhouette against the flashes, seemed to hold its breath.
"Another rope here," Jacob shouted, pointing to a particularly vulnerable joint where the wind was already tearing at the pegs. Caleb, nimble despite his youth, scrambled up a crossbeam, a coil of thick hemp rope clutched in his hand. He moved with a blend of fear and determination, the exposed height and the furious wind a terrifying combination. Below, men pushed against the uprights, their shoulders straining, their boots sinking into the now muddy ground. Each gust was a physical blow, requiring every ounce of their strength to counteract. They worked in a desperate, silent ballet, their movements synchronized by an unspoken understanding of the shared danger and the vital importance of their task. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth, ozone, and the raw, unvarnished fear of nature's wrath.
Hours later, as the storm began its slow, grudging retreat, leaving behind a world thoroughly washed and still trembling, a profound quiet descended. The only sounds were the dripping of water from the trees and the heavy, ragged breathing of the men. They stood, soaked to the bone, mud-streaked and utterly exhausted, surveying their handiwork. The barn, though battered and scarred by the tempest, still stood. A few minor timbers had splintered, a section of roof sheeting had ripped free, but the core structure, the magnificent timber frame, remained intact. A collective sigh of relief, deep and heartfelt, rippled through the group. Elder Samuel, leaning heavily against a post, offered a silent prayer of thanks. Jacob, looking at his neighbors, their faces etched with fatigue but alight with a quiet triumph, felt a surge of emotion that transcended the physical exhaustion. They had faced the storm, not as individuals, but as a single, unbreakable force. This barn, now scarred but standing, was not just a testament to their skill, but to their unity, their resilience, and their unwavering spirit. The storm had tested them, and they had not been found wanting. The sun, now breaking through the receding clouds, cast a golden light on the triumphant scene, promising a new day and renewed purpose. A winter's test. The years had softened the sharp edges of memory, replacing the urgency of construction with the steady rhythm of homestead life. The children, once toddlers clinging to their mothers' skirts, were now strapping youths, their hands calloused from daily chores. Jacob, his beard flecked with grey, surveyed his domain with a quiet pride. The barn, a testament to shared labour and unwavering resolve, stood as the heart of their thriving farm. Its timbers, seasoned by sun and rain, hummed with the contented lowing of cattle and the rustle of stored hay. Then came the winter of the deep snow.
It began subtly, a dusting of white that transformed the rugged landscape into a pristine, hushed canvas. But the flurries soon escalated into a relentless blizzard, dumping feet upon feet of snow, burying fence lines and turning familiar paths into indistinguishable drifts. For 3 days and nights, the world outside their sturdy home became a swirling white void. When the storm finally broke, revealing a sky of brilliant, piercing blue, the silence was profound, broken only by the creak of settling snow and the distant caw of a raven. Jacob was the first to emerge, shovel in hand, his breath pluming in the frigid air. The sheer scale of the snow was breathtaking, but a knot of unease tightened in his stomach as he approached the barn. A subtle, almost imperceptible sag in the long, south-facing slope of the roof caught his eye. He circled the massive structure, his gaze tracing the lines of the eaves. Yes, there it was, unmistakable.
A significant section of the roof, burdened by the immense weight of the snow, was bowing inwards, threatening to collapse. A cold dread, sharper than the winter air, pierced him. The barn, their livelihood, their shelter for animals and crops, was in peril. He knew instantly that the snow had to come off, and quickly, but the sheer volume was daunting. And the weather. The temperature had plummeted, turning the packed snow into a treacherous, icy crust. "Jacob, what is it?" Elder Samuel's voice, raspy with age, cut through the crisp air. The old man, bundled in thick wool, squinted at the barn roof. His eyes, though clouded by years, still possessed a keenness that missed nothing. "The south pitch. It's bowed." Jacob nodded grimly. "Too much weight, Elder. We need to clear it. Today." Samuel's brow furrowed. "That's a dangerous climb, son. And in this cold." "It has to be done," Jacob stated, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. He turned towards the house, where his sons, now young men themselves, were already emerging, shovels slung over their shoulders. "Elijah, Daniel, get the long ladders. We'll need ropes and the axes to break the crust." The task was monumental. The snow, compacted and frozen, was like concrete. Each shovelful was a struggle, requiring brute force to dislodge. The ladders, slick with ice, swayed precariously in the sharp wind that whipped across the open fields. Jacob, ever the leader, took the most perilous position, near the deepest sag. He moved with a practiced grace, his heavy boots finding purchase on the icy shingles, his gloved hands gripping the rough wood of the ladder. Elijah and Daniel, their faces flushed from exertion, worked below him, carefully clearing the snow that Jacob dislodged. The cold bit at their exposed skin, turning their fingers numb despite their thick gloves. But they worked without complaint, their youthful strength a powerful complement to their father's seasoned endurance. Jacob instructed them on the safest way to clear the roof, how to distribute their weight, how to avoid creating larger, more dangerous slides. He taught them the subtle art of listening to the groan of the timbers, of feeling the shift in the structure. Elder Samuel, despite Jacob's protestations, insisted on helping. He couldn't climb the roof, but he stood below, a watchful sentinel, ensuring the ladders were secure, shouting encouragement and occasionally handing up hot mugs of chamomile tea that Jacob's wife had prepared. His presence, a silent testament to shared purpose, warmed them more than the tea. Hours bled into a long, arduous afternoon. The sun, a pale disk in the sky, offered little warmth. Sweat froze on their brows, and their muscles ached with a deep, persistent throb. Slowly, painstakingly, the massive drifts began to recede from the roof. The rhythmic thud of snow hitting the ground was a constant, satisfying counterpoint to their laboured breaths. As the last stubborn chunk of snow was pried loose from the deepest sag, a collective sigh of relief escaped them. The timbers, freed from their immense burden, groaned faintly and then settled back into their true alignment. The sag was gone. The barn was safe. Jacob stood for a moment, looking out over the snow-covered fields, his chest heaving, his body weary, but his spirit renewed. He looked at his sons, their faces streaked with grime and sweat, but alight with the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. He saw in their eyes not just the fatigue, but the burgeoning understanding of what it truly meant to care for their land, their home, and their legacy. The winter had tested them, but like the sturdy timbers of the barn, they had held firm. A legacy built by hand,
The crisp morning air carried the scent of thawing earth and wood smoke from the kitchen hearth, a comforting aroma that had been the backdrop to Jacob's life for decades. He sat on the rough-hewn porch, the very timbers he'd squared by hand, now smoothed by countless seasons and the friction of daily life. His gaze swept across the homestead, a panorama of vibrant life carved from the wild. The barn, its massive frame now structurally sound once more, stood proudly, a testament to the family's grit just a few days prior. Beyond it, the winter wheat, greening delicately, promised a bountiful harvest. The orchards, still dormant, hinted at future blossoms, while the chicken coop buzzed with the industrious clucking of hens. Jacob leaned back, the worn wood groaning softly beneath his weight.
His muscles still ached with a dull throb from the exertion of clearing the snow-laden roof, a reminder of the raw power of nature and the even greater power of communal effort. Elder Samuel's words, raspy with age, yet firm with conviction, still echoed in his mind. "A strong roof holds more than snow, Jacob. It holds a family, too." And so it had. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows that danced and shortened as the day progressed. Jacob watched his children move through their morning chores with an efficiency born of years of practice. Elijah, now a young man himself, guided the team of horses through the newly thawed fields, his movements mirroring Jacob's own, a fluid dance of man and beast. The rhythmic clang of the plow cutting through the soil, preparing it for spring planting, was a familiar symphony. Jacob remembered the first time he'd held a plow, the sheer weight of it, the resistance of the earth.
He taught Elijah to feel the pulse of the land, to understand its needs, not just to force his will upon it. Daniel, his younger son, was in the timber yard, splitting logs for the spring fires, his axe rising and falling with precise, confident strokes. Each cleaved log landed with a satisfying thud, a testament to his growing strength and skill. Jacob recalled the countless hours he'd spent teaching Daniel the nuanced art of the wedge and maul, the importance of reading the grain of the wood, the dance of leverage and power. Daniel didn't just split wood, he communed with it, understanding its innate resistance, its eventual surrender. Sarah and Mary, his daughters, moved between the garden patch and the small smokehouse, preparing the soil for early greens and tending to the last of the cured meats. Their hands, though smaller, worked with the same deliberate care and purpose. Jacob observed Sarah explaining to Mary the proper way to turn the soil, her voice soft but authoritative, her fingers demonstrating the subtle art of enriching the earth. He saw in them the quiet strength of their mother, the enduring spirit that had underpinned every season of their lives. A deep sense of satisfaction settled over Jacob, a warmth that permeated his weary bones far more effectively than any fire. This was more than just a farm. It was a living testament to patience, to perseverance, to the unyielding belief in the virtue of honest toil. Every timber, every stone, every furrow in the field had been shaped by their hands, by their collective will. It was a legacy built not with grand pronouncements, but with calloused palms and aching backs. The simple rhythm of their lives, the daily ebb and flow of chores and communal meals, was a stark contrast to the fleeting complexities of the world beyond their valley.
Here, the measure of a man was in the strength of his handshake, the integrity of his word, and the bounty of his harvest. The greatest tension they faced now was the unpredictability of the weather, the constant negotiation with nature's whims. But even that, Jacob knew, was a form of grace, a reminder of their place in the larger tapestry of creation. He thought of his grandfather, Cobb, who had first put axe to this wilderness, who had envisioned a homestead where only forest stood. Cobb had laid the very first stones of the foundation, his hands shaping granite, his spirit indomitable. Jacob had continued that work,
building the timber frame, raising the barn, expanding the fields. Now, his children were picking up the tools, not out of obligation, but out of a deep-seated understanding of what it meant to belong, to build, to sustain. This wasn't just about farming.
It was about growing people, about cultivating character, about sowing seeds of responsibility and reaping a harvest of purpose. The challenges they had faced, the harsh winters, the broken tools, the bowing barn roof, were not setbacks, but crucibles, refining their spirits, forging their bonds. Jacob rose slowly, his joints protesting slightly, but his heart full. He walked to the edge of the porch, inhaling deeply, drawing in the essence of his thriving domain. The sun was fully up now, bathing the valley in a golden light. A legacy, he thought, wasn't just about what you left behind, but what you built, what you taught, and how you lived. And as he watched his children work, each one a vital cog in the well-oiled machine of their lives, he knew that this legacy, built by hand and sustained by spirit, would endure.